to Season 8, Episode 11 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And we are, of course, still reading George Lakoff's Moral Politics, How Liberals and Conservatives Think. We're in the section of the book. You just dropped your book on the floor.
On my foot.
You're so upset with it that you can't even pick it up.
Yeah,
this time we're covering two chapters in one go here. He's kind of in the section of the book where he's going issue by issue, explaining in his weird little fantasy world how liberals and conservatives think about specific issues, this time regulation in the environment, and then chapter 13, the culture wars, which covers everything from affirmative action to the arts, which I think we'll spend most of the time on here, because his stuff about regulation in the environment I didn't find terribly interesting. It kind of just lined up with everything else he's been saying in this whole book. But I don't know, what were your thoughts?
Yeah. I don't find anything productive in anything he writes at this point. He's repetitive. He's dishonest. He's stupid.
Yes.
I mean, he's really ignorant, willfully ignorant, and so I'm trying to skip over his descriptions of conservative thought because of all those things apply to his writing.
Yeah.
About conservatives. Because as I've said last couple episodes, I'm trying to get something from his explanation of the liberal worldview.
I think there's still a little bit of benefit in looking at what he has to say about conservatives, because I don't think, well,
by the way, I'm drinking out of my Lord of the Rings commemorative mug that looks like a wooden mug, like from the movie, like when they're in the prancing pony.
Yes.
But it has like a steel lining on the inside, and it's probably plastic. But we've been watching the Lord of the Rings.
We have.
Movies have been re-released for theatrical release.
Yes, but it's the extended editions. It's not even the theatrical version.
That
so
is
it's
true.
The full 4-hour long cuts.
It's been a long, and I did fall asleep once today. I don't know if you noticed that.
I thought I heard you snoring in the theater.
It kind of woke me up. That was just briefly. Well, you know what? The Ents, the Ent, the Treebeard.
Yes.
When he talks, he just lulls me to sleep.
Oh, I think that's purposeful.
I know.
Because that's exactly what happens to the hobbits, too, in the movie.
Yes. And then I'm watching them fall asleep, and I'm just trying to doze off. Very relaxing. And, the seats in movie theaters are so much better than they used to be. I just wanted to share that with our listener about that wonderful experience with watching The Lord of the Rings, and actually a film adaptation of a talented writer who had some honesty. And then I come home and I read this garbage.
Yes.
But I'm now 100% hostile.
Yeah, no, I've noticed.
To this author. I was trying to not be 100% hostile to this dishonest hack. But now I think the rest of the season, I will just have to insult him the rest of the way. But anyway, go ahead.
What I was saying earlier, before we talked about The Lord of the Rings, is that I think there is still some value, because I don't think he is, the only one who thinks these things about conservatives. I think he speaks for some liberals, especially those who think that they're like, well, I'm looking at politics scientifically, because that's been like his goal through this, and say, well, I'm just collecting the data, and this is what their worldviews are. And I think there are a lot of liberal people in academia who do think these things about conservatives and think that's how they structure their worldview. So I think it's good that we're countering those things, at least to a degree.
Okay. I don't agree.
Yeah.
I think it's worthless. I don't think... I have never heard this theory of nurturant parent, strict father theory in the wild.
Well, I don't think the nurturant parent, strict father thing even really has much to do with what he's talking about. But I think what he says, well, the conservatives hate regulation. I'm just going to summarize this first chapter, unless you have anything you really want to pick out from this one.
No, go ahead and summarize it, and then I have some insults in here. Go ahead.
But he says essentially the reason that conservatives are against regulation is because they categorize everything into, like, if you're rich, that means you're successful, you want to work on your own. Putting regulations on the economy harms people from having, their self-independence, stuff like that. And therefore, we shouldn't have any regulations on anything. That's what he says conservatives believe. Same thing goes for the environment. His discussion there is at least a little interesting. I thought it was weird that that's the only place in the book where he brings up God, is in relation to the environment, because his point is, that conservatives see themselves as dominant over nature because that is their God-given right.
They're stewards.
But then he makes the argument, which I think is correct, that a lot of liberal people view nature itself as somewhat divine.
Yeah,
and we have
deity.
to, as a living thing, as a
Gaia
living concept itself,
yes.
which he brings up, which I think is a good point to make. about the liberal side of things.
But it doesn't. It's not. I mean, he says it's consistent with his theory, but he just kind of glosses over that they think that that the liberal worldview is that Mother Nature is a deity.
Yeah.
For crying out loud.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. I mean, you'd think you'd explain how that is. How is it that thing's a deity?
Yeah, how does that play into this nurture?
What kind of God is this?
Because he lists, like he's been doing throughout the book, is like, you have the following metaphors for how people view things, and he lists, nature is a divine being for one of the liberal ones, and he spends literally one sentence in this whole chapter describing, he says, that's all he says about that. You'd think you'd have more of a fleshed out idea if you want to talk about the liberal worldview and how that fits into things.
Yes.
But of course, what he says is the liberal view is, nurturance, therefore we have to nurture the environment because we're a part of it. It's part of our family, and it takes care of us the same way we should take care of it. That's what separates the liberals and the conservatives.
Right.
Conservatives view it as a commodity, something that can be used, whereas the liberals view it as something that's something holy in a way that we have to help and support as it supports us.
Yes.
Do you have any other thoughts on that whole chapter? I don't know if there's much to talk about there.
Well, I mean, he mentions, he's just so. I'll just mention how he's dishonest about it. That he says conservatives don't just want to reform regulatory agencies to get rid of what is cumbersome, while still protecting those who need protection. They want to get rid of regulation completely. And says who?
Yeah.
Says who? Where does he come up with these? It's a typical left-wing straw man argument, meaning you create like a scarecrow out of straw, and then you murder him, right? But you haven't killed anybody. You haven't actually done anything other than you created this straw man, and then you destroy it, light it on fire or whatever. That's a metaphor. Yeah. But you haven't actually accomplished anything because you created it. It's not real, and he's making these arguments as if any conservative actually believes these things, but they don't. And so I just get so aggravated with his dishonesty. But he had a good summary, blah 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 blah. But I do want to mention, he mentions a couple things that may not have you wouldn't recognize what the issues were. But in the 1990s, he mentions the spotted owl, and he mentions a newt. But he actually says the quiet part out loud, which was they wanted to stop logging in the Pacific Northwest, I believe. And so they used the Endangered Species Act to protect this little tiny spotted owl. And it was controversial because it was so stupid. And what it ended up in the long term is by not cutting down those old growth forests that he's talking about, Mother Gaia or whatever, is that you end up with is you just have a lot of combustible material there, and you have huge forest fires that just destroy everything, including the spotted owl. So it's just poor land management and stupid ideas, but Gaia.
Well, he spends a lot of time talking about the EPA. He's like, well, conservatives want to eliminate the EPA, and they don't want this, this agency to have the power of enforcing these laws because, they want all free enterprise and let everybody do whatever they want. Or maybe they just don't want another enforcement agency under the federal government. Maybe that's more in line with conservative
Well, he fails
ideals.
to mention the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act, which were passed under Nixon. They don't like to mention that the conservationists are the ones the conservative conservationists are ones that cleaned up our environment.
Yeah, and there's no mention of conservationism in here anywhere. Which is
he mentions the term. But kind of disparaging, like that's not really what they want. They just want a free for all and whatever.
Yes.
So I did appreciate that he recognized that the leftists, if they have a philosophy about this at all, that isn't just about power and bad businessmen fighting the man, is that they believe that the Mother Nature is this amorphous deity that they worship. Yeah. So it's kind of nice that he actually conceded that. So then he goes into the culture wars, which is the next chapter. What do you want to talk about that? Because there's a whole bunch of BS. I even have on the margin, commie BS, where he says liberals further adopt the common metaphor that a natural group is an individual, the metaphor that defines collective action and collective rights. So he's right that they do describe, with regard to affirmative action, a collective group of people as if it's an individual. They don't treat people as individuals; they treat them as groups, and they want to try to balance the scales and all that kind of stuff. And it's just racism or sexism. And we're seeing the fruits of this philosophy. But, he does describe it, and I think that we are very familiar with the attitude and the paternalistic attitude of people, white liberals that advocate for affirmative action, which is, these people just can't fend for themselves.
Yeah.
They can't keep up. We have to give them a leg up. It's, oh, come on, man.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else you want to say about it.
I mean, I think he is right. He's not right in how it comes to the conclusion, but I think he is right in pointing out that, conservatives see affirmative action as giving preferential treatment to people based on race or sex. And, you're opposed to that because, well, why should we be giving preferential treatment to anybody based on race or sex?
Yeah, and immutable characteristics that have nothing to do with their qualifications.
Yeah. And he says it's part of the strict father whatever, where you need to have competition between everybody. But I think it's more of a, why are we giving anybody preferential treatment based on something they can't change?
Yeah.
I think that's really what the core issue is here.
Did you notice the introductory paragraph? He says, conservatives have understood very well what their goals are, not just political and economic. Conservatives want to change American culture itself. Does he not understand what the term conservative is? I mean, he's just so stupid. I read that. I'm like, this guy, why am I wasting my time reading this book and then talking in this podcast to our listener about it?
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
I interrupted you, I think.
No, that's all right.
I'm sure you had some brilliant point.
Man, you're in a sour mood.
Happy Father's Day.
Yeah, no kidding. I don't know what else we need to talk about with affirmative action, because again, he's just saying
white men still have advantages, he says.
Which he lists. He goes into that old thing where he just lists those things as if they're facts, they're proven facts, and just staples of society that.
You know what I think the biggest mistake. And this is the biggest mistake, but I actually recognized it at the time. I'm going to mention the pandemic. At the biggest mistake was not highlighting that there's no metrics for ending it, and that's what they should have focused the argument on when they established these racial preferential treatment or quotas. The quotas are technically illegal, but they do them anyway. But there should have been, and still needs to be, an explanation of when you're going to end it, because most college students are women, most college graduates are women, certainly most lawyers are women coming out of law school, and most faculty members are now. I think they might be mostly women, but I know all of the college. Students and as a population are women. So at some point, why do we have female exclusive scholarships and grants? I mean, why are we encouraging more of them? Yeah. They're already a majority. They're going to be becoming a super majority. I think it's time to turn around and get there. No, I really don't. I don't think there should be preferential treatments based upon race or sex. But why isn't there a discussion of, okay, when are we going to stop this? Yeah. When it's 80%, 80-20? I mean, there should be some discussion of, okay, he makes this argument that it's to equalize past wrongs. Okay, well, when does that done?
Yeah.
And I would almost be in favor. In fact, I would be in favor of reparations if they followed my theory of bitching rights. Have you ever explained my bitching rights?
I don't know about on the podcast. I don't know what you're talking about.
I just mentioned the other day at a work luncheon. So this originated in a late night conversation at a Steak and Shake when I was in law school. I had a buddy who's now passed away, sadly, and we're all pretty well intoxicated, and we're at a Steak and Shake, as I said, and there's something wrong with his burger, and none of us had any money, so we're all split the check or whatever,
sure.
And so. He was just, God, I'm just so upset that they messed up this order, and he just wouldn't shut up about it. Yeah. I said, Tom, would it make you feel better if I bought your burger? If I just paid for it, he said, that would make me feel better. I appreciate it. And so, you walk up to the register and you pay at the old Steak and Shakes before the kiosk. So I paid for it and came back and said, Tom, you're taken care of. I paid for it. And he says, I'm still so upset. I said, wait a second. You can't complain anymore. He says, what are you talking about? It's my burger. I said, no, it's really not. I bought it. I paid for the burger. It's now my burger, but I'm of course you're going to eat it because that's the deal. But I bought your bitching rights. You can't bitch about something that you've sold. And I would be in favor of reparations if for now and for all time they can never bitch about it again. Because how many generations are we removed from slavery, and they're still bitching about slavery?
Yeah.
I mean, and of course the obvious argument is, well, every segment of the population has been a slave at some point in genetic history. Like if you go back far enough, all of us would have been the ruling classes were always the elite. So eventually, either on your mother's side or your father's side, somebody was a slave of somebody. If you could trace it back far enough. And so I think if we followed my theory of bitching rights, yeah, I mean, it depends on how much it is. But yeah, I'd love that. It's just, okay, now, for now and all times, shut up. You can't bitch about Jim Crow, which didn't happen in your lifetime for most of them. Certainly not in my lifetime. Yeah. 1970, I was born, and I'm 54. I mean, for the elderly people, of course, the elderly people that lived under that, they're not bitching about it because they realize how much better it is. But when they're not 80, and if they're cognizant of it, they're going to know. It's a lot better right now. Okay. Anyway, but it's like somebody who's 20 bitching about Jim Crow.
Yeah.
I want reparations for what? I mean, literally for what?
Yeah.
But I'm more than willing to pitch in taxpayer money to shut them up for all time.
Something tells me that would not go over well if you proposed that to Congress or something.
In the alternative, they gave up their citizenship. I'm just joking. No, I'm not joking. I think they shouldn't be citizens. If I don't think they should vote. If you're that stupid that you think that you're entitled to pay, for payment from people, like California is passing a reparations bill.
Yeah.
They never had legalized slavery in California.
Yeah.
Not for a single day. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Why would the state of California pay reparations when the state of California never allowed it? It was unlawful to have slaves in California from the date it existed to the present day.
Well, their argument is, of course, going back to what he was saying earlier, just the grouping everybody together as groups of people, not individuals. And they said that any negative factors now are like a ripple effect from back then, which is just, I think, a horrible argument.
And I'm really amused. I'm going to talk about this a little bit longer.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm really amused by the people that it turns out, the African Americans that turn out that their ancestors are the slavers.
Yes.
Those are so great.
Yes. Was it one of the View hosts?
I think that's right.
Yeah, who did the testament back and found that her ancestors were slavers. Yeah,
pay up, bitch. Yeah. Unearned privilege. Unearned privilege. And of course, there's always excuse. Oh, but I'm now thought of as lesser because of slavery,
because everything's grouped into groups, and you don't actually examine anybody based on individual anything.
Yeah, I think it was, now moving on to the other hot topic, gay rights, which. Let's best be honest. Gay rights should be thought of as significantly different than equal rights for race and sex, because gay rights is based upon behavior. Period. Right?
He would disagree. George Lakoff would disagree.
Well, it doesn't matter what your propensities are. It's about your behavior. Gay marriage, all the rights they want relate to your behavior in relationships. It's not because of some immutable characteristic. It's because of the behavior. And his argument is the danger argument for them. Now that I think transgenderism is really calling into focus this thing that the gays aren't going to want. Those gays. This is the argument that's dangerous, that the transgenders are doing. That I think the people that are paying attention that are gay advocates are really worried about is the transgenders are saying, I was born in the wrong body. And sure, like Richard Levine, who's had a couple of kids, he's our Surgeon General.
Yes.
Because of course he is. In this bizarro world that we live in. But he calls himself a she. But in any event, he says, he discovered that he was really a woman in a man's body. How is that? And of course, the vast majority of people realize it's just nuts. All right, that's either somebody who's got some sort of fetish, or is an attention whore, or demented. Right? Those are the three options. Yeah. And 80% of the public is like, yeah, Mark's right, but we don't want to say it because it's rude, right? But we all think it, we all know it, and so that brings up the corollary. Wait a second, if we know that's crazy, especially when they're saying let's start cutting up 13-year-olds and that kind of stuff, because if a 13-year-old is convinced they're in the wrong body, there's obviously a mental health component of that, and that's what you should be focusing on, as opposed to just trying to. Everybody understands. Everybody rational understands that. 80% of the public knows that. So then the corollary to that, though, is what's the difference between that and a person who says they're gay and that's how they were born gay, right? And I'm not saying you're not. But then the third one, which is the third rail, so to speak, of gay political thought, which you're never supposed to say. Okay. Right? So you ready for it?
I mean, you've been on fire this whole episode. I mean, I don't think there's any stopping you.
Now, before I say it, we have to make clear that this is not your political views, and you are not endorsing it.
Okay.
You're not endorsing anything I'm saying. You're laughing at me and not with me.
Yes, sure.
So, having said that, what is the difference between the argument that, I was born this way and I feel this and that's because God made me that way? What's the difference between a gay person, a transgender person, or a pedophile? Because I am certain that a pedophile has urges, right? I think they're physical. I think they're mental urges. Whether they're born that way or because they were molested, because having been in the system, the criminal justice system, it's so common to have a molester have been molested. We don't accept that explanation that, well, they're not at fault, or they should be able to express themselves in this manner. And view photographs, that they like to see, because that's child porn, and we send people to prison for that. What exactly is the logical difference between that and somebody who just says, "Well, I'm just gay"? I don't know as far as that part of it. Yeah. Now, granted, the pedophile part is that it's minors,
yes,
right, and so that's the deal breaker, the big difference. But as far as
consent involved,
as far as that, but we don't consider that. Well, you're just born that way. We say, well, you're sick, So how is that different from any other, what used to be called sexual deviancy? Anyway, so I think he makes that argument about this, they're born this way. And I think but basically the bottom line is, I think the transgender argument, and it has become such a focus, I think has opened the door to that level of criticism about the gay rights thing, which I think undermines a lot of their arguments. But anyway,
back to what he says.
Yes.
Talking about, I just want to mention his argument about conservatives here with gay rights is essentially what he says is why they're opposed to gay rights, is because he thinks that conservatives just want to uphold whatever the status quo is, because homosexuality is outside of the status quo, therefore it's bad. That's essentially how he summarizes the argument. No concern for religion, for any understanding of what is the nature of man and women. What is the point of everything. He kind of alludes to it, but he says, I forget where he says it in here, but they see the natural ways with heterosexual couples, but he doesn't get into why that is the natural thing. He doesn't get into the actual worldview behind it. It's again that oversimplification of everything, where it's just he's not actually getting into what things are here. And he mentions, this isn't even something that I really know about, but Clinton's proposal to allow gays to function in the military. Go ahead.
So this whole thing was such a big deal, and it was so stupid. So before Bill Clinton, gays were just they were not allowed in the military. Okay, yes. So if they were found to have been gay, they'd be I think they were dishonorably discharged. They'd be investigated. So if they were found out they're gay, or they're going to gay bars or having gay sex or whatever, they'd interrogate them. And they found out they're gay, they're out. Yeah. So Bill Clinton was the original "Don't Say Gay." By the way, he adopted a policy: "Don't ask, don't tell."
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Which is what this author is alluding to without actually saying it. He's trying to like split the baby and say, well, the gays in there, why don't you just keep quiet about it?
Yeah.
If it's nobody's business, then why does everybody know about it? But if you make a big deal about it, you're out.
Yeah.
But if you just keep your mouth shut and don't tell everybody, don't say gay, don't say you're gay, and then you'll be fine. And so that was really controversial. And of course, the gay community didn't like it either, because why do you have to keep quiet? And the military saw it as just kind of fudging the whole system. They wanted to they're in or they're out, so to speak, of the military. So that's what that was. And people now don't even understand that.
Well, because the military at this point is, there's a lot of the recruitment ads have lesbian parents and stuff like that, where it's like a celebrated thing even within the military itself, which has gone so far beyond even what he's talking about here.
Right.
But again, he says, which is interesting, he says the Clinton administration approached the question of gays in the military as one of civil rights, as if the integration of gays in the military was akin to the integration of blacks and women in the military. He says it was a drastic mistake to lump those things together. And I'm surprised he would even call it out like that. I don't think his reasoning is the same, as what we've been talking about.
Well, that's not what they did anyway.
Yeah.
They didn't say they might have given a lip service of civil right, but they said Bill Clinton specifically adopted a policy saying, if you say that you're out of the military. That's not a civil right argument. He was giving him more credit for what it was. It was just some sort of weird compromise, trying to placate the gay lobby, while not undermining, the military policies, which are we can't have a bunch of guys having gay sex or they're on watch. That was what what the worry. Now I don't follow military affairs closely enough to even know if that's ever been a problem, because hopefully you have enough discipline where even if you have an attraction to somebody else, you won't do it in a way that's going to compromise everybody's security.
I have some friends in the military who say women generally tend to be a problem in that regard, because there's so few of them, and you have all of these guys who are away from home that there's just things happen, and it's a really big problem with people getting discharged for things like that.
Right.
It's just a nightmare to deal with, especially when it gets higher up in administration and stuff like that. So
interesting.
But then he moves on to multiculturalism, which is the
half a page.
shortest section in this chapter, which is interesting. And he summarizes, the conservatives just don't like things that aren't their things, and they think everything else is wrong. But the liberals are nice, and they're welcoming of everything, and therefore it works. Which
that's pretty much what he says.
But it's such an oversimplification. He does somewhat, I would say, get right that, conservatives view other moral systems as inherently wrong, but it's not just because it's something different. It's because they think that there's some sort of eternal truth in their worldview, and you really have to get at what you think that eternal truth is, and getting into the history of conservatism and religion and everything like that. But he just doesn't do that. He just says, well, they don't like different things. Different thing immediately means bad. But the liberals, they're nice. They see different. They see it as strength. It's that diversity is strength motto is essentially what he's saying about the liberals here.
Well, I think part of the problem is that the liberals don't even know what the culture is that they're talking about. They think it's like, it's spicy food. I like that Mexican food. It's spicy. Oh, the Indian food, that's spicy too. I wonder if they're related. But when they get down to it, it's like, for some cultures, it's like, we kill the gays, right? Are you gay? Because I will kill you.
It's like the queers for Palestine realizing, Islam doesn't actually like gay stuff. Yeah, that's weird.
I think that's just great. I think it's great that there is a gays for Palestine. I think
it's not just gays for Palestine; it's the queers for Palestine.
Queers for Palestine. Yeah, that used to be a pejorative.
Yeah, no, they
Can I use that now? Can I go around calling gay people queer?
They use it, so you might as well.
Yeah, but then
it might be a compliment.
There's a couple words in the English language that you're not supposed to use, even though a certain group will use them. Well, you said it. You don't say it's pejorative.
You make a good point.
But yeah, that was a pejorative. I guess they could say it among themselves.
Yes. But yeah, he's essentially completely overlooking that different moral systems are. By the way,
I was thinking that I interrupted you again.
Yeah, that's all right.
I was thinking that if your mother ever died, did I ever tell you my theory that I'm going to then be a gay man?
What?
Yeah, so I won't actually be gay, or as Norm Macdonald would say, a deeply closeted gay man. Because then if I'm gay, then I won't ever have anyone ask me out on a date. like a woman.
Oh, I see. I see.
And then they will leave me alone.
Yes.
The women will. I don't know about the guys, but
so it's weirdly kind, I guess.
Yeah,
weirdly respectful.
Yeah. So if they
mom.
say, "Oh, you want to go out to dinner?"
I'm sorry, a deeply closeted gay man.
A deeply closeted gay man. I'm sorry, I'm not interested. It's not you. It's me.
So stupid.
Then I'll go to the parades and stuff.
Yes. But what I was saying, back to multiculturalism, is he just completely just does not mention that, hey, maybe... Well, I mean, it's kind of his theme throughout the whole book, is that there's different moral systems that are incompatible with each other, but he doesn't seem to recognize that in describing the conservative point. Well, of course, Islam and Catholicism are not just going to align, 100%. They can't just say, well, yeah, let's put aside all of our differences and let's have this great society. I mean, I think they can absolutely be respectful towards one another.
And there's some core beliefs that are
similar,
yes.
But it's never going to be everybody can just come together and live, kumbaya happy and create this new culture, because nobody's ever going to want to give up, their own firmly held beliefs and make them into this weird little melting pot. But that's kind of what he describes liberals as. They say, well, we could just have all of our, it's like the universalist position that everything can kind of just become one thing, and there's really no difference between anything.
Yes,
which is just never going to work and has never worked in the history of ever.
Correct. But have you going back to my last comment?
Sure, let's go back to that.
Have you ever seen Norm's interview where he mentioned he's deeply closeted?
Yes, it's great.
And then they said, "You're gay?"
You're gay? No,
how dare you say that of you? I said I was deeply closeted.
He's done that a few times, a few separate interviews. Funny. It's funny every time.
I gotta steal that.
Yeah.
So then he talks about education, which I almost took almost no notes. Because at this point I'm just so fed up, and I think his standards is similar theory. The issue of standards and education, I think, go hand in hand.
Yeah, he is right about one thing that I think he has kind of a theme, because he has a section on education, and then he talks about standards, and he brings it back to moral education.
Yes.
But I think he is absolutely right in recognizing that education is one of the biggest factors on the moral values of a society. Like how people grow up, what they hear, and what they're taught growing up is absolutely important. And he frames it as a bad way. Well, he says, essentially his argument is liberals like public schools because they can incorporate all of the good stuff and everybody gets to hear all of these diverse opinions. Right. Homeschooling and private schools are bad and evil because that's a form of indoctrination, because they don't get to hear everything. It's, tailor-picked by the parents, so they could just indoctrinate them into whatever they want.
He completely misses the point of why conservatives don't want that indoctrination for the liberals at the school. Because he says that the homeschoolers are indoctrinating, but he doesn't understand that the left-wing educational system is indoctrinating the same way.
Well, I thought it was very funny coming off of his description of, the holy liberals who are very multicultural and want everybody to celebrate their own culture and stuff like that.
Yes.
And then say, well, but you can't school your kids how you want. Correct. If you want them to be raised Catholic, that's weird, and you're creepy, and you're importing your values onto them, completely missing. Brother. That's how cultures develop and are maintained, and systems of thought are kept.
Yes.
And of course, he says the only reason that conservatives dislike the Department of Education is because they hate social programs. Yes. That's what he just keeps coming back to.
It has nothing to do with the fact that federalism, maybe the Constitution. I don't know, because there's nothing in the Constitution about public education, period. And that was for a reason. I mean, there really wasn't a public education system. There were some universities, and there were some state-funded colleges. Actually, I don't know if that's true. I think there might have been. There was maybe a couple states had some public education, but it was really people were self-taught, privately funded, absolutely. And it was so much cheaper, even per capita back then. And now we just have this huge monstrosity that is so expensive. But anyway, yes, I don't know what else. What else you want to talk about? Standards, art.
Yeah, I mean
the rest of this crap.
I think
education. It's all the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
The art section I thought was funny. Because essentially his argument for conservatives is that they, we were just talking about this last night. We had this sort of similar conversation, but he says,
Me and you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't we?
I don't know
maybe
what
not.
About
art, didn't we? Did we talk about art? I don't know, but he says...
I had a discussion yesterday morning about art.
I thought we talked about it last night. But anyway, let me get to my point here. What he says is that the conservatives really just don't get any of the deeper meaning, right? They just like things that are aesthetically pretty and reinforce their moral standards, whereas the liberals, in their contemporary art, they're challenging the standards, they're making you think deeper and stuff like that. And he calls out, you read the New Criterion, right?
Yes, I do.
And he points that out as like a really sort of horrible, evil thing. The purpose of the journal is to impose and uphold standards for quote-unquote worthwhile art, et cetera. But he says essentially that the liberals have no notion of what is, or the conservatives have no notion of what is, the good, deeper meaning behind art. And I thought we were just talking about that. The liberals, a lot of the leftist, artist people are only focusing their art. Their art does have a message, but it's always focused on the material world. It's always focused on something political, something physical here in the world. Whereas if you look at conservative art, they're much more concerned with God and with the core virtues and stuff, and how that's embodied. If you look at the art that conservatives think is great, it's probably going to be images of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and stuff like that.
Or even like the Greek god statues, or that kind of artwork that represents something, some sort of aesthetic or beauty for beauty's own sake. But it certainly religious conservatives see that. What does they call that? Iconography.
Iconography.
Iconography. Yes. Potato.
Sure.
That it represents some sort of higher vision, and that all beauty comes from God and all that sort of thing. Yes.
Yeah. But I just thought it was wild how he can say that about conservatives, is that they just don't appreciate anything deeper.
I don't think he's meta-conservative.
What do you mean?
I don't think this author has ever met a conservative.
Oh, yes. I thought you were. I heard you wrong. I thought you said meta-conservatives and prefix meta, as in like outside, like metaphysics. But yeah, no, I don't think he has ever met a conservative, because it's like that's the point of conservatism, is you think that there's something eternal and unchanging and something true, and of course you want that in your art, you want that in your culture.
Yes,
and there's something deeper and outside of this. But he has it almost completely reversed, because I think I think it's very true that all of the liberal art. He points out some really disgusting examples in here. What was the artist's name? Serrano, I think was his last name. Let me see where he talks about it the first time. But the crucifix in a jar full of urine.
Yeah.
He says, well, that's just profound, and the conservatives just don't get it because it's just an attack on religion. Well, maybe the conservatives have a deeper meaning of what the crucifix symbolizes, and they see something more behind that than just an object that you can use for whatever art you want. And it completely misses the point that the conservatives are seeing the deeper thing and saying, well, that's something important. That's something that we should not defame because it is important, because there's something eternal beyond it. Whereas the liberals are just saying, well, this is just an item that I can use to symbolize, my weird identity problem, my anger at the Catholic Church.
Right, and it's cheap, and it's even in the 90s when they were doing that.
Andre Serrano was his name.
Yeah, it was really controversial at the time. But now it's just boring, because they also had a statue of Mary covered in poop. That type of thing, and it got you a name, and it got you donations, and people would pay ungodly sums of money for this stuff. He pissed in a jar and threw it. Somebody else made the crucifix. I think it wasn't even like he made the crucifix. So what's art of? Okay, it's a message, whatever. But now it's just it's just passé, to do something like that. I think, but then it's like, okay, why don't you throw a Quran in there with it? Yeah. Come on, buddy. Yeah. You're avant-garde.
Yeah. I just think it's so
because
deeply.
They're going to say en garde, like ha God. They're going to stab you.
Yes.
No, and it's not with a little stabber. And part of me, and it's a very small part, thinks that they should.
But I just think it's so deeply ironic that he's saying, the conservatives can't understand anything eternal, and the conservatives are going, well, that's not just because, it's the status quo. It's because it's a symbol of the, guy who came down and died for us, and we have this whole moral system around it. That's why it's important. It's not just because it's the status quo, and you just completely cannot.
That's why I'm just so done with this guy, because when you criticize conservatives for criticizing that particular artist, it's like, come on, man. I mean, you're just being completely dishonest, and not even paying attention, and not even accurately stating any arguments against it. I mean, whatever. And to I think I'm going to let my subscription to New Criterion Labs because they're not radical conservative enough for me. Because they're really mainstream. They're super mainstream, and it's a lot about the arts. And I don't follow opera, and there's always a writer about opera and stuff. And but any event. So what else? Moral education. Where I kind of want to
talk about that, about how it does uphold, what are the major core values of a society. Yeah.
Well, what are the thoughts you have about this chapter?
Well, he definitely at the end he breaks his own rule of even trying to be somewhat objective, where he describes what you should do in teaching children, and he says essentially what you should do when you're giving them a moral education is you should present both sides and say, well, here are the flaws with both the strict father and the nurturant mother, and you, small child, can decide for yourself. But he really describes it as an attack on the strict father morality, because he starts out the discussion by saying, well, the strict father just doesn't let any of those other values in. And he's saying, well, we need to change that. And so he's inherently putting down the strict father morality by saying that.
Yes.
And then he even goes on, he says, I don't know how much more obvious he can get, but he says, there are facts that matter, which will be discussed below in chapters 20 to 23, which is his end part, where he says, why the liberals are better. But he says, essentially, that we should be treating everything relatively. And then he says, but there's some important facts that prove that the liberal side is better. We'll talk about that later. So, yeah, I don't know what else to talk about this chapter.
It's hard for a relativist to be doctrinaire in beliefs, but they all are.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Yes.
Funny, weird, not funny, ha-ha.
Yeah.
Because they're dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other thoughts on this chapter? I think we've hit the end.
What was that guy's name in the 50s that was going after the commies?
McCarthy?
Yeah, I think we need to have a new McCarthyism.
What would it target?
We need to round these people up. No, I'm just joking. I don't really have anything else.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Well, lucky for you. The next chapter. Have you looked at what the title of the next chapter is?
What was it?
Two Models of Christianity.
Yeah,
so we will get some great thoughts
Yes.
on religion next time.
I'm sure there's a lot of deep thoughts
Yes.
from this guy about what Christianity is.
But we're getting close to the end here.
Yes.
So then we'll move on to something better.
We couldn't do worse.
That is true. We could probably wrap up his last 4 chapters on why all the liberals are right pretty quickly, I think, when we get to that point, because he's just been describing it the whole time. We've already talked about all of his arguments.
I hope so, yes.
Yes. All right. You seem tired.
This man exhausts me.
Yes. No, he's very frustrating. It really is a shame that this is the level of dishonesty that this quote-unquote academics are saying when they're talking about
conservatives. Isn't this guy a linguist?
Yeah, he is. And he's giving linguists a terrible name.
What name was it? Queer?
Something like that. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, this has been Season 8, Episode 11 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
Oh, yeah, this guy sucks. We need to bring back good linguistics. Yes, that's my job.
Make linguistics great again.
Yeah, MLGA.